With the right-wingers who are, very critical of China, I will say this. I think they have a point, okay? Like, I don't think they're completely wrong. I think they need to listen to the libertarians because, as usual, the issue with right-wingers is that a lot of times they'll have more or less, this is not true always, but a lot of times they'll more or less have, a point to what they're saying, but libertarians just always have the correct legal and governmental answer to the question. Okay? So I'd say it like this.
In the defense of the conservatives, though, it's hard to get a read on them. No one wants to go to war with China, so somewhat becomes a question of negotiations and leverage. Of if they're trying to make more of a stink of things or trying to be more aggressive under the sentiment of that we're being taken advantage of. And in this case, if it turns out that Wuhan either was direct from the government or just accidental, it might be a time and place for the government to actually step up. And, I listen, I'm not advocating for war with China, but there certainly is something to be said for, I guess, trying to be a little bit more forceful and seeing if you get some concessions.
Well, let me say this, right? Because I want to start this off with granting something to the right-wingers, right? So what I would grant to your point there is that it is really fucked up that they did this. That is really fucked up, and it's not okay. And China is a bad government. I mean, they are like a legitimate, fascistic state. There's no question about that. Like, they are really, really bad. They do not tolerate political dissidents. They rob a whole lot of people of basic, freedoms. And I don't just mean freedoms in like the American conception. I mean like in most of the advanced world, very basic freedoms. They're very creepy. The fact that they are a huge market and that you have to kind of go through their government in order to get access to their market creates all types of very troubling incentives for big corporations. And again, the fact that they have control over like figures in American culture is, like I said before, just incredibly creepy. I do think, though, it like you have to keep in mind where China was to where they are now, right? Like, as bad a government as they are, this is the Chinese Communist Party, they're not Mao Zedong. Okay, and that's what their legacy is. Like, that was their government not that long ago. And that, like, this is the biggest mass murderer in world history was their leader. So just saying, just to keep that in mind, it's just, that is the reality of the situation. So here's what I will say to the idea of, like saying, even when you preface by saying, we don't want to go to war with China, right? Let me just say, it is not an option to go to war with China. And the idea of even considering that in the back of your mind is just insane. I mean, China has a serious arsenal of H-bombs. Now, not as many as we have, but this isn't a war that you could even compare to any war that's ever happened in human history. A war with China would mean losing, like Tokyo and South Korea and Los Angeles. And it would just be a disaster. Scott Horton was making this point when he was on Tim Pool the other day. And by the way, go check that out if you haven't already. But it's not an option. Now, we could, I suppose, win that war in the end, but we would legitimately be risking destroying the species. There's no option to go to war. So now, what I'm going to say to the right-wingers is this, right? I think that Americans have developed empire mentality. And it's a real problem that I think really, really needs to be addressed. And the truth is that right-wingers need to realize that the empire is your enemy. the empire, and I think it makes it a little bit easier when you see that all the people who lead the empire hate your guts and also worked pretty tirelessly to ruin your last president. But the empire is, it's not just the fact that we run most of the world and bully other people around and threaten other countries. It's this mentality that it's created. And a big part of the reason why the empire has been able to exist and persist is because right-wingers fall into this mentality. And the mentality is something like, it's like a binary thinking between either we got to do something about this or you're okay with this, as if those are your two options, which are not the case. You don't have to be okay with this or do something about this. You know, just like an example, there's a million examples you could think of in just everyday human life. Where you're like, I may not like the way my neighbor is raising his kids down the street, but that's a far cry from I'm going to go do something about that. Because it's like, well, no, I'm just going to raise my kids the way I think you should raise kids. But I don't know. I'm not really in a position to go do something about that. I don't know what the strategy would be or how I would pull this off. I don't know what the repercussions for that are. And I frankly just don't have the time and resources to go raise other people's kids. I got my kids to raise, And so this empire mentality creeps into people where it's like, Iran has some dispute, the Sunnis and the Shiites have some dispute in Iran and Iraq. And it's like, well, we can't just let them do that. It's like, wait, what? Like, who the hell are you? Why do you even think this is your fight or you have anything to do with that? And if you have that mentality, then people start going, oh, so you just don't care. It's this false binary where it's one or the other. So I would just say that with issues like Taiwan or Hong Kong, or something like that, it's not that I don't care. I want everyone to be free. I don't want anyone not to be free, And I think it's horrible if a communist government is denying someone their freedom. But it ain't our fight. And the idea that the United States government is going to go do that, it's not just that it's wrong and that it doesn't make sense. It's bananas. It's insane. The federal government in Washington, D.C. can't even control the crime problem in Washington, D.C., let alone go solve the dispute between Hong Kong and China or Taiwan and China. It's like this empire mentality that we are even capable of solving these problems without making it, way worse and just robbing the American people. And it's also, and this is the statist empire, mindset. It's like, what do you feel like? This is just somebody else's sacrifice? Like the question comes down to this, right? It's not, do you care about Hong Kong or do you want to go do something about it? It's like, are you willing to sacrifice your kids for the freedom in Hong Kong?